Hey there, welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. In this video, we're going to talk about the sample dungeon from original Dungeons & Dragons. So, I talked about Gygaxing the dungeon last video. I'll put a link. And how the original dungeons were meant to be very weird and kind of mythic underworld and maybe not make so much sense sometimes. And there is a sample dungeon here. Now, the book specifically says this is here for an example, so it can kind of inspire you to make your own dungeon. I don't think this was really meant to be playable as it is, but there's some interesting stuff we can look at here. I'll probably speculate. I mean, I wasn't around in 1974. I'll speculate as to what I think would have went on in gameplay here and how you might be able to use this in your kind of more modern OSR games or even 5e or anything like that. So let's take a look at the map first of all. Okay, this is the map that was redrawn by Wizards in the copy of the rules that I have, the kind of reprint copy. The original map, you can search around online, you'll find it, is a little bit different. So there's a couple areas where we might have to refer to this just so that things make sense. But for instance, in this upper right-hand corner, it mentions a stairway in the text, which you can see there in the pretty much center of the screen right there for me. But that stairway is not on the sample level here as we show it. So, there's a couple of little goof ups there, but it's fine. So we're going to look at this again from the perspective of how I think, this was supposed to inspire people and how it can inspire us now. So let's start off by saying this is definitely not a first level dungeon. Some of the monsters on here are a little bit more powerful. Some of the tricks and traps are tough, and part of that is relevant in this first section. So let's take a look at what the book says. Okay, 1. Note the stairs down lead through blind passages and return to circular room with wedge-shaped divisions. Unless secret door is located, this area will lead nowhere. Only one way through, otherwise you can't go forward. That sounds like bad dungeon design. But keep in mind, this is not the first level of the dungeon. It could be a side level. It could be an area that nothing had to be explored in some of these big mega dungeons, right? Part of the whole point of the thing was to go in and get where you could. So if you reached a point where you couldn't go any further, you would just turn around and go somewhere else. If this was the first level of your dungeon, or if you're trying to make a dungeon that has a lot of loops and stuff, this is probably not a great idea as it stands. That being said, we could use this in a way as possibly a trick or a puzzle or something, right? We can see here that the secret door is, the whole thing's set up almost like a clock face. You could set up some kind of a riddle about, between 5 and 6, or, as the sun sets, assuming your party knows that it sets between 5 and 6, is where the door would be, something like that. But I think one of the main reasons why this is here is not to stop people from moving forward, but to take a whole bunch of time, right? Remember, wandering monsters, burning torches, time in the dungeon was super important. So if this is going to take multiple turns to figure out where the secret door is and to get through, some parties, especially let's say it's the third level deep in the dungeon, they might have to turn around and leave because I can't figure it out yet. And we talked about this once before in the kind of going back and forth to the dungeon. It's going to set up a situation where it's like, okay, should we get right back there because now we have more torches and more henchmen, or do we need to wait a week to heal because somebody else might find that secret door because we know it's there, right? There's a hint, there's a riddle, whatever. So it could be interesting in that way. This also falls into that category of the dungeon itself is fairly empty, so you want to add some atmosphere and some other things going on so it feels a little more like they're searching for something. There's something going on there. You don't want to just be like, oh, wedge-shaped room, doors, nothing. Wedge-shaped room, doors, nothing. You want to, add a little flavor to this. Also remember, wandering monsters were a big deal in these earlier dungeons. This will come into a factor here. There was some comments in the last video about some people not really loving empty space. Empty space is part of an old dungeon. This emptiness is, first of all, it shows it's deserted, it adds that horror feel, but also this is a time for the wandering monsters, right? There's no monster in this area, but some random unknown monster might come here. And again, that's a resource drain because wandering monsters typically don't have any treasure. So we want to figure out a way to get through this as quickly as possible. You might have a wand of secret doors or some kind of skill at finding it, through magic or whatever. And then you'll find it faster if you're higher level, or you just take the time to do it and hope for the best. So that's section 1. Simple. Again, I don't know if that's the first thing I'd put on the first level of a dungeon. It might be bad for a new player to come in and be like, we can't get into this dungeon, it's terrible. But it might be something for a future quest, right? So interesting. I like the weird shapes to the rooms. I like the empty space. That works for me. Let's take a look at section number 2. Number 2 says, this is a simple room labyrinth, generally leading nowhere, but A would be a room containing a monster and treasure. Let's say 4 ogres with 2,000 gold pieces and 1 magic potion. Okay, so that's a decent haul there, right? This is now talking about this section down here. Okay, again, I want to point out something else here before we go too far. You notice to the left of the screen, you can see there's some dead ends there. I imagine that this dungeon is supposed to be more sprawling and that there'd be more to it. They're just showing you some sections here. So this labyrinth might be kind of a way through to other areas, right? We can see that there's a secret door there that makes the trip a lot faster if you find it, right? Otherwise, you've got to go through this labyrinth to get to where the ogres are, to get to where the treasure is. If I predicted that that first thing would take a lot of time and be a resource drain, I don't know if I'd put this right away after, but, maybe, just to kind of keep things going. But imagine that there's more paths going on. Remember we talked about last time the dungeon changing and shaping as we go. So this whole section here might end up taking a decent amount of the time, meaning actual turn time, as the party is creeping through it, possible wandering monsters, things going on. But the payoff here is that you've got these 4 ogres that if you beat them, you're going to get some experience points, and you're going to get their treasure, which is more experience points, and you're going to get a potion, which is kind of nice. So that's section 2. Again, pretty kind of standard stuff here. Let's look over at number 3. This area simply illustrates the use of slanting passages to help prevent players from accurately mapping a level. Exact deviation from cardinal points is quite difficult for them to ascertain. Okay, this is actually something that I picked up as reading this and I hadn't really thought of before. If we look over here at the map, we can see in Area 3, we've got these slight slants here. Now, I know that many of us, when we run into these weird sections here and the players are having trouble mapping it, assuming that you're using mapping, we might help them. We might draw it for them or show them whatever. But the idea here is that some of them, especially this Area 3, the kind of lower part, it's not quite like a 45-degree angle. It's not a 9-degree angle. It's somewhere in the middle. You might actually say, if there's not a dwarf in the party, you might say, passageway leads to the south. It kind of seems to be not exactly south, but to the south. This makes it a little bit trickier for people to map. And again, mapping was important for people to find their way out of the dungeon, to relocate areas that they had to retreat from, that have more treasure, to explore, to get through faster. So making the mapping a little bit more difficult was part of the game. And also it's kind of an interesting thing here that you can just say, it's to the south and let it go at that. Now, again, this map is here. You can see that it's just like kind of black down there, like a dead end. And they actually added a couple of doors here. In the original map, there are not doors. And this kind of goes to nowhere, which I imagine probably goes somewhere. Again, I feel like the map's incomplete purposefully. This is just showing you some ideas. So if you add those doors there, that kind of stops the point, right? The point here is that they're going to go at this weird angle, and they're not going to know that they went a weird angle, and then they're not going to be able to figure out where things are spatially, ideally, right? That's kind of the point of it. So I think, again, with the change they made to the map by adding those doors, I'm not sure that was such a good move to show what it really meant in the text, at least in my interpretation. Let's go to Area 4. No matter which way west players move, they will end up turning into the lair of the monster B. Let us suppose a basilisk. There is a false door in the second passage north. The tunnel to the east contains a trap C, a slide to the lower level, which is disguised as a set of upstairs. Okay, I'm going to break this down as we go through it. So let's go back to the map. This one's more complicated. We're getting to more complex areas. Okay, so now we're in section 4. Okay, so let's read this first part again. No matter which way west the players move, they will end up turning into the lair of the monster in B. So that's this, right? West meaning over where the B is. So they see that intersection, they go north, this western direction. Okay, so now you've got this basic, again, a loop going around where this monster is. It's not a direct path to the monster's lair. They have some choices which way they might go. They're mapping it. They're taking their time. They might actually, knowing my players, they would go down one of them, see that it goes to the cross, and then go back up and go down the other way. So, they're basically kind of moving around this lair, which it kind of gives them an idea of what's there. It's taking time, the potential wandering monsters. But eventually, they'll get to this lair B, which is in the center. This is a loop, in a sense. Small loop, but a loop nonetheless. The false door. There's a false door in the second passage north. Okay, so that's just, they go up there, there's a door, they spend some time trying to get through it. It's a false door, again, taking time, making noise, problems. So over here, C is a trap, but it's not a trap that's going to poison gas you with spears or whatever. It's a set of stairs. The stairs are going up, you think. You start walking up the stairs, it drops you down one level. And remember, being down one level is more dangerous. If you didn't want to go down, that's a problem for you. Okay, when we head south from 4 to 5, we encounter, well, let me read it. The combinations here are really vicious, and unless you're out to get your players, it's not suggested for actual use. this I like, because it's like we're showing you like what could be the possibility, but keep in mind this is very vicious. Passage South D is a slanting corridor, which will take them at least one level deeper, and if the slope is gentle, even dwarves won't recognize it. Because remember, dwarves in this have that ability to see the passageways, because again, it's important. You don't want to go down to the next level until you're ready. Room E is a transporter, 2 ways to just about anywhere the referee likes, including the center of the Earth or the Moon. The passage south containing F is a 1-way transporter, and the poor dupes will never realize it unless a very large party over 50 feet in length is entering it. This is a surefire fits for map makers among the participants. So again, let's look at the map and let's run through this again. So again, south from 4, we come to this, which is... think about this. He's saying this is vicious and mean or whatever, right? But how is it vicious and mean? There's not a monster down here that's going to instantly kill them. There's not a save or die poison trap. There is D, which is basically a long corridor. They're going to spend time going down it. And if the slope is not, if you want to make the slope less steep, maybe even a dwarf can't recognize it. Or if there's no dwarf in the party, obviously they won't at all. And now all of a sudden they're down 1 level, at least 1 level, maybe 2 levels. And they're taking time to get there. So now they've spent multiple turns burning up their torches, getting lower, and now they're at a lower level where they might potentially run into a monster they're not ready for. We've got E, which is a transporter, but it's a 2-way transporter, so, you can go back and forth, but you could end up in the center of the Earth or the Moon, right? So it could put you somewhere completely different. So that's also really interesting, right? This gives you the scope of D&D. He's saying you could end up on the Moon. And again, I'm assuming that doesn't mean you go up on the Moon and you die because there's no oxygen and whatever, although he did say it was vicious. But the idea that you're going to transport it to the Moon where all kinds of things could happen. You could have all kinds of, creatures on the Moon. It's a different environment to investigate. Could be really interesting. Center of the Earth as well, right? And it is a 2-way, so you could always get back. But maybe it's 2-way, but you've got to do something to get back if you want to make the adventure in the center of the Earth. This is not uncommon in some of these like pulp books and stuff that we know were popular among the people that were designing D&D. But this one here, F, actually is pretty. this one's kind of that's my evil DM laugh. So you've got this transporter, but it's doing it in such a slow way that they're drawing this path as they're going, and next thing you know, they are transported somewhere else, and it's 1 way. So when they turn around and go back, none of what was there before is there. These 1-way transporters can really throw off the mappers. And also remember, let's say the party's got like a handful of torches left. They're like, okay, we can explore for another 10 turns, then we got to turn around and get back. Well, they go 5 turns down this thing. They go, okay, we got to turn around and go back. They can't get back that way. Now all of a sudden they might be trapped in the dungeon. They've got to figure something else out. This is very, very deadly or potentially deadly. So, I could see now where he's saying, oh yeah, that's pretty vicious. Okay, Area 6. Again, here are a couple of fun items to throw at players. Again, fun items to throw at players. This isn't meant to be mean-spirited. I've talked about this before. It's supposed to be fun stuff for them to overcome. G is a shifting section of wall with a secret die roll to determine which way it will go. Such a section will possibly close in the room 20-foot square located northwest. Point H is a 2-way secret door. On an odd die roll, let's suppose it opens on a room to the west. On the otherwise, it opens the passage to the south. The same trick can be used for staircases, having them go up or down depending on how you roll, right? They're also very interesting. These are things that I personally haven't really been using that I could totally see myself incorporating. Let's take a look at it. So in G, we can see this is a sliding block. So you're going to probably have it on some kind of a timer. And now, again, like I said, there's probably more passages that go beyond here. They just drew it that far because that's what they're showing. So you've got this sliding block. So you walk, maybe when you walk past it, it's triggered. Maybe it's triggered every so many turns, but the block moves. So what we end up with is the possibility of, let's say they go north to that room up there, which seems to have a trapdoor, so you could get out of it somewhere, right? The block might slide and block you in. And on some turns, the block stays there. So now in this case, for instance, you've got a trapdoor. So if you went into this section, the thing closed behind you, and then you roll a wandering monster, it might come out of that trapdoor. Now you've got nowhere to go. Again, it could be pretty deadly. It could also block off passages that you want to go to. This could be real, or the way back. And every turn you're rolling, it's got to get, it's moving around as you go. So it's kind of like a very simple video game, right? Where this block is moving all around. I could see that being really fun and interesting, and yeah, could be a really cool encounter. Now, H is interesting to me. A secret door that when you go through it, you're rolling randomly to which way it opens. So the secret door opens either to a room or to a hallway. Again, with multiple groups going through this dungeon, or you just going through it multiple times, you might eventually end up in a different spot than you thought you were going to be at, and that can be really fun and cool. All right, so section 7 here is real fun too. We'll take a look at this, and again, I think this one could easily be incorporated into almost anything. This is the Nexus for a modular section which will revolve at random periods. Although the passages north, south, etc. will remain the same, the areas 10 foot by 20 foot beyond, so that's beyond what they've drawn here, will be different at various times. Again, this will frustrate those setting out to map a level. So now what you've got is this room that the players come into one way or the other. There's also a trap door here. They can go up or down, a trap door up. They can actually, if they go, let's say, north to one of these tunnels, they might go into a room, and then they might go back and then later say, well, we know north is that room up there. But when they go in the room, it goes somewhere else because the room itself is spinning on them. So you've got this, the part in the center stays the same, but the rooms above and tunnels turn, so the whole dungeon is shifting, which is really cool. He does say, though, all round rooms must not be nexuses, right? Because again, you don't want to do that every single time. However, the circular structure, for example, in one could, with a bit of alteration, be made into one. As could any room of any shape, providing the modules were properly designed so as to rotate around it. So it's all about having these things rotate around. We've got this center point that you're in. You go down this trapdoor and you're in this room, and then you've got rooms moving on the other sides, which could be really fun. And you could have them set off by different things. Different keys could do it. It could just do it randomly on time base. But this is just a really fun thing. Again, the dungeon is weird. The dungeon is changing. The dungeon is moving. The dungeon is alive. This is part of this kind of design. So now let's take a look at the last section, which is a little bit complex. And for this, I'm actually going to use the other map because I think it's easier to see it. This is section 8. Okay, so I'm going to walk through this and kind of follow through and show you exactly what's going on. So on the right-hand side there where that X is where we're starting. Note the pit X at the full-way intersection containing a secret door on its southern surface. A small tunnel will lead discoverers to the room containing a monster eye, a true troll, or two perhaps. So again, that dotted line coming down is going basically up and around, and then there's a trapdoor on the ground in that room. You bust up in there, there's a couple of trolls in there, which of course obviously there's probably going to be treasure and stuff. And there's also a door that leads somewhere. So that's going to bring you to a different part of the dungeon that you couldn't have got to without finding this. So you fall in this trap or crawl down to the pit and you find there's a door down there. This is something I've used a bunch of times. I really like it. I think it's used in several modules beyond this. So it's not something that went away really, but I love the idea of there being a pit with then a secret door at the bottom. So it's the bonus for falling in the pit, I guess, right? The western portion contains the room of some evil man, complete with 2 secret doors for handy escape. So we've got effectively this area over here where it's kind of a little messy, right just to the left of the 8, basically above. It looks like there's a J in there. It doesn't say J on here, but that's what it looks like. And you've got a couple of secret doors so he can get away if you encounter him because he's an evil man, right? Going to cause trouble. There's also a flight of stairs leading down. Falling into the pit would typically cause damage if a 1 or 2 were rolled. Otherwise, it would only mean about 1 turn of time to clamber out, providing the character had spikes or associates to pull him out, and providing the pit wasn't one with snapshot door and the victim was alone. So we see a few things here, right? We see this idea of the pit trap, somebody falling in the pit trap and not even taking damage necessarily. It's a time suck. I kind of like that, actually. I feel like I might use that more and more. When somebody falls in the pit, they might only take damage sometimes. Otherwise, it just takes time. And also, we're introducing the idea of you've got to climb out. If you're by yourself, you need to make sure you have some spikes and stuff to climb out of it. And if you are by yourself as well and it's a snapshot, you might be trapped in there. So being by yourself is very dangerous in the dungeons. So those are the 8 sections that are laid out in this kind of example to show you ways you can build things. But we also get this. In laying out your dungeons, keep in mind that downward and upward mobility is desirable, for players will not find a game enjoyable which confines them too much. On the other hand, unusual areas and rich treasures should be relatively difficult to locate and access must be limited. The layout of a level will affect the route most often followed by players. Observation of the most frequently used passages and explored rooms will guide the referee in preparation of successive levels, which of course should be progressively more dangerous and difficult. So what do we have here? Once again, he's saying, see what your players do, see what they're enjoying, add more of that, right? Do things, challenge them, make things difficult to get to, but not impossible. You don't want to frustrate them. You want to give them lots of areas to explore. See the areas they go to. If you have players that are constantly going through trapdoors, put more trapdoors. If you have players that are constantly looking for secret doors, put more secret doors. You want to put stuff in the dungeon that will be challenging, but also that you know your players enjoy. All of this is about fun. All of it is about adventure. You don't have to just pile up tons of pre-planned encounters. The dungeon itself, the exploration of the dungeon itself can be very, very fun if you just add some atmosphere and some very interesting rooms that are very memorable. If you overload every single room with something going on, to me, the dungeon just feels very cramped. To have lots of space works better, in my opinion. But what do you guys think? Let me know what you guys think about this. I know some people said they didn't really like the type of dungeon we talked about last time. Some people said they really did like it. Did you think this was interesting? Was there anything here that I mentioned or I read about here that that you would now use or that you have been using or that you would be like, oh, God, I would never use that? Let me know. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. I am working on a solo, running a solo thing because people had asked about that, but it's kind of long and complex. I don't want to make a super long video. So if it ends up being really long, I might put that on Bandit's Keep Actual Play. We'll see. I'll keep you updated on that. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.